maybe the UAW was doing it in their current strike, but they did what they could do to show that he was not afraid, that he had faith because he had God behind him. So Ahab comes up probably to him thinking that there's no way that he's going to show up. And when he showed up, this was quite a shock to him because he knew that he had the power, he had the strength, he had the ability and authority to go ahead and do away with him at any point when he wanted to. Excuse me. So he showed up, and Elijah turned the tables on him. He said, I'm not the troublemaker, you are the troublemaker. So he went after him right out of the chute, letting him know that it's not going to be a pushover, that he was going to stand up for what was right. How hard is that for us to do these days? We're caught up a lot of times in the society norms that don't always stand up for the right thing. It's very difficult sometimes to be that individual that wants us to do the right thing whenever you're in the midst of people that are going the different direction. It takes courage, and not courage that we can usually find in ourselves, but courage we need to get from God through our faith. So Elijah doesn't even hesitate when he says, nope, I haven't caused any trouble for Israel, you have. You and your family have brought upon Israel trouble by worshiping Baal instead of Yahweh. And then he actually gives Ahab a command. He tells Ahab to summon all of the people of Israel to Mount Carmel with all the prophets of Baal and Asher. He just totally throws Jezebel under the bus too, making a point that all these prophets that supported her are also evil. So he's calling for everyone to come see what's going to happen. It's sort of, I don't know, I can almost imagine the food trucks going there and the tents setting up and the people are selling the little balloons on the side and cotton candy. This is like the event of the year. This is going to be the Royal Rumble. Yeah. But it's going to be everyone from the area is showing up. So everyone can be there to witness what's happening. And either they're going to prove that Baal is the God or Yahweh is. So Elijah's speaking with authority, even though he could have been killed right on the spot. He's not afraid. He has God backing him. He has all of the faith in the world. These people of the Bible put their life on the line time and time again. And as individuals, sometimes we're just hesitant to talk about our own faith. It's sort of, I won't lie to you, I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning thinking, what in the world am I doing? Yeah, I'm a dumb retired fireman, I'm not a minister. A little flutters in the stomach, then I did what I'm telling you to do. I just sort of turned it over to God and said, well, it's what's going to happen is going to happen. Hopefully, I got this up the shield in case anybody starts throwing anything as much as to read about it. So a little protection doesn't hurt. So we're going to go on to verse 20. So Ahab summoned all the people of Israel and the prophets to Mount Carmel. Then Elijah stood in front of them and said, how much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. But the people were completely silent. So some translations, instead of the word, they use the word instead of follow, they use falter. Falter actually in the Hebrew word means like lame, someone that's crippled. So how long are you going to limp back and forth between Yahweh and God? It seems like the people of Israel during certain periods were sort of like the wind. Whichever way it blew, they would go. I guess my question is what type of gods do we have? Who's our Baal? Do we choose to sometimes put more emphasis on worldly things than we do on God? Our job, our finances, whatever it happens to be. So we need to decide. I just love that. If God is God, follow him. Pretty simple saying. Unfortunately, we know it's not that easy to do sometimes. So, it says, how long will you limp back and forth between God and Baal? So I just want to know that we all have a tendency sometimes to waver or wobble or limp back and forth a little bit. But God doesn't like that. He wants us to follow him always and always. The Bible, in one part, of course, said that he is a jealous God. He doesn't want to share us with any other gods or deities. So we need to keep that in mind. So we don't need to fit into society. We just need to do what God tells us is right. Back in verse 22 then, it says, Elijah says to them, I am the only prophet of the Lord who is left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Now bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose whichever one they wish and cut into pieces and lay it on the wood at the altar, but without setting fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood on the altar, but not set fire to it. Then call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is a true God, and all of the people agreed. So this is, right here, this is like the Super Bowl of the event. This is the showdown at the OK Corral. This is where, one more saying, the rubber meets the road. I'm done now. So this is to show who the real God is. And if Joshua fails, he fails big. He's not going to make it out of this alive. So Elijah proposes this contest between him and the prophets of Baal, which is really a contest between Yahweh and Baal. It's not between Joshua. Joshua is just the messenger, the conduit for Yahweh. He knows in his heart and every fiber of his being that his success is not dependent on him. As humans, we like to get recognition. We like to take credit for what we do. But the good things that come out of us is a product of what God does for us and sends through us. It's really important to remember. Each side will get a bull to sacrifice on the altar, but their God has to set fire to it, and thereby proving that they're the true God. The people said, okay, fine, let's do it. So the gauntlet's been thrown down, and the show's about to start. So verse 25, then Elijah says to the prophets of Baal, you go first. For there are so many of you, choose one of the bulls and prepare it, and call on the name of your God, but do not set fire to the wood. Elijah gives them advantage of choosing first which bull they want to sacrifice. He wants to do everything in his power to know that there's nothing amiss going on. He's not stacking the deck. He's given them the first shot, and after all, there's only 450 of them. You would think that might be enough if Baal is a true God. As it turns out, maybe not. So in verse 26, it says, so they prepared one of the bulls and placed it on the altar. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, shouting, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no reply of any kind. Then they danced, hobbling around the altar that they had made. About noontime, Elijah began mocking them. "You'll have to shout louder," he scoffed, "for surely he is a god. But perhaps he's daydreaming. Or maybe he's relieving himself. Or maybe he's on his way on a trip, or he's asleep and he needs to be wakened." So Elijah starts getting on them a little bit. We see these athletes do a little trash talk. I think Elijah probably started that. So he's telling them, making fun of their supposed God. If this is a God, he doesn't sleep, he doesn't eat, he shouldn't be daydreaming. And this is a pretty important event for Baal to prove himself. But yet, no answer. So they have spent several hours up to this point dancing, hollering, waving, praying, and without any answer. So I think maybe a few of the people in the crowd are starting to get the picture. You sort of have to love Elijah's personality here. He goes after them. There's 450 of these people there, and you got Elijah on the other side giving them trash. How do you not like that? He's our guy. So Elijah knows that what he's doing, and he thinks he's going to make them maybe doubt their God, but instead they just get more angry, and they dance louder and harder and try even harder. So, the title of the sermon that Scott gave it is Faith and Faithless. When you look at these prophets of Baal, think of the faith they had. They didn't get any answer after doing all of this worshiping for several hours. Somebody starts to rib them a little bit about it, and they get even more enthused, more angry, and they start worshiping harder. Imagine what that would be like if Christians were like that. These guys didn't lose their faith. They had faith in the wrong thing. So maybe that's a lesson for us, and we're going to talk about that a little later. Not too much later. I won't keep you too long. So we go on to the next verse. So they shouted louder and followed their normal customs. They cut themselves with knives and swords until the blood gushed out. They raved all afternoon until the time of the evening sacrifice. But still there was no sound, no reply, no response. So these guys are doing everything they can. They're dancing, they're cutting themselves, they're showing all kinds of enthusiasm for their God, which is not answering them. Pretty incredible that they hang on as long as they do. By now, the people in the crowd are getting a little, nothing's happening here much, so they're getting a little bored. It's sort of like one of those defensive struggles in football. Not a lot happening till the last few seconds when the Browns lose. Different story. But so anyways, this goes on for hours and hours, and they're just devoted to Baal, but nothing is happening. Now, the practice of cutting themselves was something that pagans used quite often, and it was strictly forbidden to do that as Christians offering worshiping. It was not only not part of our method to worship, thankfully, but it was forbidden. So, but that was a very common practice whenever they worshiped the pagan gods. So it was found in a couple different places in the Bible. In Deuteronomy, it says, "You are children of Yahweh your God, therefore you must not gash yourself. You must not make your forehead bald for the dead." They talked about certain types of haircuts, certain cuts of gashings. They even said that you're not supposed to tattoo yourself as a form of worship to a pagan. So those are all things that are forbidden to do worshiping Yahweh. However, the pagans accepted that as a normal practice of worship. So, verse 30, then Elijah called to the people, "Come over here." They all crowded around him as he prepared the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one to represent each of the tribes of Israel. And he used the stones to rebuild the altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench around the altar large enough to hold about 3 gallons. He piled wood on the altar, cut the bull into pieces, and laid the pieces on the wood. Then he said, "Fill 4 large jugs of water and pour the water over all of the wood." After they had done that, he said, do the same thing again. And when they were finished, he said, now do it a third time. And they did as he said. And the water ran around the altar and even filled the trench. So most of the scholars in the Bible think that probably the altar that was built there was torn down by Jezebel. So, of course, the Bible is full of symbolism, and by building up 12 stones for the 12 tribes of the altar and rebuilding that, it was very significant for the people at that time. He just does all of this to prove that Yahweh is the real God, that God is the one that is going to save people, that is going to send down fire. He lets the other people choose the first cow. He lets them go first. He gives them every advantage that he can possibly think of to give them, yet they don't prevail. Nothing happens for them. So then he comes on stage and takes over. What Elijah does is significant. First of all, he uses the altar of Yahweh, which had been torn down previously, likely by Jezebel, and he has to repair it. He does so using 12 stones for the tribes of Israel. He reminds them of their heritage, their story, and how Yahweh chose Jacob, named him Israel, and created a whole nation from his 12 sons. A nation that was supposed to be a nation of priests representing Yahweh and bringing in blessings to the whole world. These 12 stones were a physical and visual reminder of their history and how far the people had strayed from their calling. So once again, he's trying to get people back into the fold.